What's going on, nerds and sexy nerdettes? It's your boy Darth. We're back in Queen's Blade Limit Break. And in this one, we're going to do kind of a combination of things. We're going to do an overview as a whole of the ultra rare warriors as we have them, as well as possibly kind of do a ranking system, give you my thoughts and opinions on them thus far, and why. Well, a couple of reasons. One, because we now have a ultra rare warrior for each attribute damage type. I know, it's hard to believe. I must be missing time or not really paying attention because we do have an ultra rare warrior for each attribute. In fact, we have one for the ultimate, and we also have two for the break attribute. Not only that, but I just want to call out the calendar here that the very first ultra rare warrior, which was a skill warrior, Dima, is actually getting ready to make a reappearance. That's right, the second rotation is coming up, and maybe you already have her and want to pick up some more copies to get her up to 11, possibly 12. Maybe you have her at 11 and 12 and you want to start working on her, I don't know, her spicy pose upgrades for the damage increase and the damage reduction. But she's getting ready to make a new appearance. So with that in mind, it looks like they're either going to do one of two things: restart the rotation, and we have no idea how they're going to do that. I'm not saying that they're going to release them in the same order, and keep in mind they are going to probably release more in the future, so just know that skill is coming up. So with that in mind, let's go take a look at the ultra rare warriors as they stand. I'm going to give you my opinion on how I view them. I'm going to also give you my favorite spicy pose, and then I want to hear from you guys. Who you're using, why, who's your favorite, do you agree with the ranking system, and then who overall has the best look and or spicy pose. Now keep in mind, really cool is that they have this nice aura and hue over their place cards, but in battle, every one of these warriors has an aura around them, which is, except for maybe Alyssa. I don't remember if I don't think she does it. They need to add one. I'll send a message in to customer support to have them do it. Each one of these warriors has an aura around them on the battlefield, which adds extra flair and animation somewhat to the battles. But anyways, the ultimate and Alyssa are kind of wonky because they are pay to win and pay to obtain. You can spend a lot of money to get them, or you can do it cheaper but way longer. So we're going to take these two together, take it with a grain of salt. Alyssa takes an SS tier rating. She is a god, just plain and simple. She was great before. She is even better now. She is one of my favorite warriors, and just all around, she is in my roster, by the way. I am using her. If you pair her with the Sacred Treasure from the break attribute, she also can trigger her ultra rare skill, which actually, when attacking, she will deal break attribute damage. She actually ticks twice, so if you have the Sacred Treasure on there, it's a separate damage of the break attribute, meaning that you're doing even more damage. The Ultimate Warrior was a little confusing to me, mainly for her passive here, that when affected by a reduction effect on own current HP, there's a 60% chance to return to the HP before the decrease. I thought this meant something kind of like this, where she consumes HP, so like consuming HP for a specialty effect, that it has a X% chance to return back to normal. Some people are saying that it's not just that, it's that when you take damage, which is actually, when you think about it, a reduction on HP, you have the ability to return back to health, basically going right back up. Well, if that's the case, does it apply to only direct attacks? Does it apply to any damage type, like burns and things like that? These are the things I'd want to know, but keep in mind, it also take it with a grain of salt. If you only have 10% HP left and you take a hit, I don't think it's going to save you from death, just like the standard mechanics in game are, especially if you are the only one on the battlefield. I don't know how that works, but if you have 50% HP left and you take a 30% hit, I'm guessing you could theoretically go right back, as long as somebody else is on the battlefield, and it wouldn't otherwise end the encounter. I don't know, I don't have her, but if it does apply to damage, I can imagine her being a terror on the battlefield to kill. So I can't rate her, I'll just say S tier for now. Now let's get into the normal attribute ones where most people are going to live. I want to start off with rating the most fun. Okay, the most fun for me honestly is Snow White. The way her abilities work, she has the ability to grant allies the ability to trigger these explosions, basically. When I think it has to do with poison type, that every time the target receives damage equal to 15%, she inflicts 1 poison, and then you have her ultra rare skill that when the enemy is inflicted with poison, they will receive dual attribute damage. The animation that goes on with that is just really cool. It's almost like seeing these explosions going off. But anyway, she's the most fun for me. Now, Dima takes the #1 spot. She overall is a great DPS. She hits all warriors for a physical attribute warrior. But what makes her deadly on the battlefield, honestly, is her crit resist. She ignores crit resist and ignores breach resist, which is additional defense reduction ignoring effect. I don't agree with breach resistance. It's here. I think that me and G123 need to have a big talk about a few things, and that'd be one thing that anyways. But also for Tailwind. She can grant herself Tailwind and allies Tailwind, which increases speed, increases attack, and gives her damage nullification ability that when receiving damage exceeding 30% of her max HP, you can consume a Tailwind and reduce the damage by a whopping 40%. That's on top of other damage reduction effects, which would probably trigger before that does. Her ultra rare skill, though, is a little weird in that if she doesn't have a higher speed, she probably won't trigger this skill. So you really need to build her with speed. But all things being equal, if you are up against somebody who has the same investment in speed areas that you do, I would like to know whether or not this triggers. Because all things being equal, if you had the same runes, blossoms, and everything else where all the speed effects are up, you'd probably have the same speed. And I'm talking about, jewels, I'm talking about bonding. Interesting concept. But anyway, she takes the #1 spot because she is a really good damage dealer both on single target and multi-target bosses as well. And she just overall is unmatched because she doesn't rely too much on granting allies abilities or things like that to really get her damage. Now, it's kind of a toss-up between Luna and the Drunkard Fist. I think they're both great warriors. Drunkard mostly specializes in CC effects that are actually really fun to play around with. I'm testing her out in high-level resistance areas. Like, I'm talking attribute tower in excess of, 2 to 400, things like that, where they have high resistances. But in terms of damage, she actually does fairly decent damage. All in all, and her ultra rare ability actually triggers quite often, as long as you can get 3 to 5 attacks off per turn, which is actually somewhat easy to do. Luna though is not my favorite, but she actually does quite a bit of damage. On her turn 2 ability, she has the ability to, on her 4th strike, as long as she has burns on it, to do decent damage. She grants allies the ability to take an extra turn, basically. Beautiful warriors on the field have a 60% chance to deal an HP damage burn, which actually counts towards the warrior who triggers it. I don't think she gets credit for that damage. However, she does get credit for the damage on her ultra rare skill, that when an enemy takes burn damage, no matter who deals it, at the end of the turn when burn damage resolves, she actually triggers this. And this is where a lot of her damage actually comes from. If it wasn't for that ability, her ability to deal damage would be really bad. So take it with a grain of salt. She can trigger her own burn stacks and get it up, but you can immobilize her and remove her ability to get maximum stacks of burn for that hit here. But burns generally aren't a problem, and being able to trigger it up to 5 times is the key to getting really good damage on her, in my particular opinion. I don't like having warriors who rely on others, but granting your allies the ability to even do an attack, 60% chance, before they even do anything, actually is really cool. I don't think it triggers barrage, but if it does, let me know. I don't think I've ever seen that. Now, so Dima, I would have to say, Right now, Luna and Drunkard are on the same par, two completely different warriors, but all in all, really good. Now, Snow White is the interesting one of the group. As I mentioned, she's the most fun to play around with. She does not do a lot of damage, guys, at all, unfortunately. She gets credit for a lot of damage because of this ability we talked about, Poison type. Every time the target receives damage, equal to 15%, she inflicts a poison. Well, when the enemy is inflicted with poison, no matter who inflicts it, she's getting credit for the damage, which is misleading as hell. I went in and hit... Volko hit somebody for like 100 million, and it was on the first turn. And the problem is Snow White hadn't even gone, and Poison type wasn't out on the battlefield. So there's something wonky going on here. I hit with Volko for 100 million. She got credit for like 34 million damage. Didn't make any sense to me, so there is something wonky there. But just understand, on her own, she doesn't really have a lot going on. As a mage, in terms of support, the more poisons you have, the less damage you take. So she's granting a damage reduction effect to her allies, up to 40%, which, as I mentioned before with Tailwind, that's really good. But it's all dependent upon having poison, whereas Dima has a 60% chance or whatever it is. Or I'm sorry, you have to take so much damage. I said that wrong. But anyways, watching her get credit for damage is not the way I want to see my damage dealers get credit unless I can fully explain what's happening. And there are instances where she's getting credit for damage when she never even took a turn. And I also want to test out this 15% on high-level attribute towers, like where it's much harder to do that. It's not hard, actually, with a couple of warriors I have, where they have high resistances and high damage reduction, and see if I can't trigger these explosions. But basically, you trigger these dual attribute fire explosions all over the place. It's visually stunning, it's fun to watch, and yeah, she gets credit for a lot of damage, but you have to keep that in perspective. Harpmaster, I think, is one of the most difficult ones for people to understand, and she makes the bottom of the list. So Dima, Drunkard, and Blossom right below her. Snow White somewhere in between, but she definitely falls under these two, no matter how fun she is to play. But Harpmaster, all she really does is she has an effect like the fish, where she forces the opponent to do a normal attack. But when they do, it's affection. She will deal up to 100% of their own attack. When attacking you, they'll do no damage, but they'll heal you. The problem I have with this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is affected by heal down. So if you inflict heal down on the enemy team, you're actually restricting the amount of healing that you can do, unless this is not subject to that, which is, as far as I know, isn't really there. It is what it is. But her turn 1 ability, all she's doing is great. She's turning your ally with the highest attack into a damage dealer. A healer. Damage of the ally with the highest attack. She's increasing the damage output by 20%, which is whopping, and it's better than an increase in attack unless it's high enough. And then 30% of the damage dealt will heal the HP of all allies. So it really is kind of like the physical attribute rune, where it heals for X% of the damage dealt. This actually does it, and it heals everybody. Now, I'm not saying this eliminates the need for that rune, because if your ally with the highest attack gets immobilized, you're screwed. And if affection is affected by heal block or heal down, then this whole setup becomes useless, except for the fact that affection forces the opponent to perform a normal attack. Granting speed down to the enemy, I like that, but it's not really great. Her ultra rare skill is also wonky, but because when the enemy action triggers a healing effect, deal break attribute damage. Well, this is actually cool, and she does get credit for a lot of damage when that happens. Again, you're starting to see a thing, getting credit for damage that happens based on an action. But her damage still isn't there even with all of that. So I do have a problem with this warrior, and a little bit more testing and probably tweaks are needed. So there it is in a nutshell, guys. Dima's coming up. You wouldn't be sorry for adding any one of these warriors to your roster, even all the way up to 11 and 12. Some of them are better fits for a PvP team at higher levels. They all can compete in high-level attribute tower. I've confirmed this. I'm still getting damage numbers for bosses in various scenarios, but Alyssa takes the top honors with the Ultimate Warrior here. Dima, followed by these two, and then Snow White, and then Harpmaster. Spicy poses. Again, Snow White takes it for me. I'm sorry. There are sexier, spicy poses out there for some people, but again, this whole setup just gets me. If you didn't see my overview of her when I did it singularly, it's almost like she went to Victoria's Secrets and got a perfectly good pair of panties, and then came home and put some nice tears in them, just waiting for Daddy Darthy to get home and greet him at the door. That's all I can say about that one. Who's your favorite spicy pose? That's it in a nutshell, guys. Keep in mind the damage attribute, the attribute damage type that was introduced with all these warriors has updated and added a level of complexity to the game. I'll go over that in detail in another video when I update the attribute damage thoughts and opinions and things like that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.